Hey guys, how's it going? And today I have a replay sent in by Rolkatsuki in their Akizuki, the Tier 8 Japanese destroyer. And before I get into the replay, I want to mention that this is previous to patch 6.3. A few of you may ask, why is this important? This was before they removed stealth fire from the game. So the Akizuki, what it was good for before this patch rolled around, was it had just a massive range at which it could stealth fire and just never be seen by the enemy team, and it was so damn trolly. Even though the ship has such tiny guns, the high rate of fire just would rip ships apart. And this poor Fubuki that just drove into the cap against this thing is going to feel the wrath of the 100mm armor piercing shells just raining down upon it, and you can see it immediately popping smoke and getting the hell out of there. Now, some of the weaknesses of this ship were, well, there's another Fubuki. Alright then. It didn't turn well and it wasn't that fast. It also only has one torp launcher. It does have a reload booster, but that has a really long cooldown. So, it wasn't that great of a torpedo boat, and it still kind of isn't. But the massive stealth firing range is what set this apart than really any other ship in the game, because a lot of the ships in the game beforehand had to sit outside of maybe like 11-12 kilometers in order to actually stealth fire effectively, and then their shells would have a bit more of an arc. Whereas the Akizuki, I think it's just shy of 10 kilometers it can stealth fire, just slightly under it. And I mean, it just can pound into enemy ships, just like right now, without any of them seeing them, as long as there's no destroyers or aircraft in range. And it's just absolutely dirty. And as you can see, the graph speed isn't taking too much damage here because he started turning, and of course cruisers are pretty maneuverable. But they're not spotting Rolkatsuki as they fire their guns. And that's kind of why this mechanic was removed. I mean, there was no counterplay to it. It made people rage quit. There was nothing they could do against it. They couldn't push against it. If they ran, the ship would just catch up and wait for you to turn around, because eventually you have to hit a border. And it just left no real counterplay. As you can see right now, the North Carolina's pushing in, Rolkatsuki's lacing them with armor piercing, and it's bouncing off a lot of the armored deck of that battleship, but some of it's hitting the superstructure and dealing some damage. And if you can think, ships like Gearing and a few cruisers could actually do this. Zhao being a huge cruiser who could do it and do massive amounts of damage with its laser cannons at long range. And ships would just take massive amounts of damage from this with no ability to return it. And it wasn't a torpedo that you could dodge really, it was accurate shell fire coming in from ships you can't even see. And as you can see, this North Carolina is just getting picked apart both by the friendly team and Rolkatsuki's continued barrage on his ship. Another thing to note, I said it before, but the Akizuki has very small guns. It only mounts 100mm guns. So what you're seeing here is a lot of bounces off armor, a lot of ricochets and shatters. Just shells that aren't doing anything once they hit a ship, because they don't have that penetration value that is needed to go through a lot of the armor in the game. These shells are pretty effective against destroyers, and when they hit superstructure they'll do a decent amount of damage, but they never really get a chance to fully pen something. And here's a nice move by Rolkatsuki, providing smoke for their team. There's that pesky graph speed again, behind the island, and Rolkatsuki just got spotted. That's the first time in a while they actually did get spotted. So there is something, probably a destroyer, within the stealth fire range, and there it is. It is the enemy Kagero, I do believe that is. Yes. I'm sorry, I have a tiny preview window that I record these with. But that destroyer got within the stealth fire range and basically had Rolkatsuki spotted, but the problem is this ship has such a small detection range when it is stealth that it can sneak up on other destroyers that did this and basically ambush them with these quick firing guns. I mean, even the high explosive against other destroyers would wreck them sometimes, as long as it wasn't something like the tier 10 Russian destroyers with their armor plating. Yeah, those aren't really fair in the first place anyway. But as you can see, Rolkatsuki's pulling away, getting out of contact range from the enemy Edinburgh over there, who, that is a massive ship that, against destroyers at least, if it gets really close, because it'll just roll basically your whole health bar into the side of you with its armor-piercing shells. But as you can see, Rolkatsuki got to the range at which they could stealth fire, and they are picking that poor Edinburgh apart. And of course, Rolkatsuki probably would have sunk that, but the friendly North Carolina slashed some shells into him at the last moment before he got around the island. So a good ship is a dead ship on the enemy team, and that's one less for Rolkatsuki to deal with. Now, right now, looking at the game, it's pretty even, and it's getting close to halfway in the match. That Kagero is still large on that flank, the enemy fleet is still pushing through C, and the friendly team holds 2 caps, though B is kind of getting contested by a battleship. Or at least he's attempting to. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. And they're fairly balanced as to what ships are left. Rolkatsuki's team is down 1 ship, but they boast the same amount of destroyers and battleships as the enemy team, and the only cruiser that's left is a Graf Spee, and that might as well be a small battleship with a very easy to hit citadel if it's broadside. Enemy Bayern, he's gonna feel the wrath of the stealth fire here. So yeah, if you haven't figured it out already, I kind of agree with the change. It was stealth fire. While I did use it on some of my ships, like my gearing, and wow, those shells are bouncing right off the superstructure. That's rather impressive. But while I did use it on some of my ships, I didn't feel like it was a very good aspect of the game. It didn't make people want to push in, and the person who was stealth firing never pushed in. So it made a very stagnant gameplay scenario, and it just kind of helped develop a meta where everybody sits back and just snipes each other. Now, Rolkatsuki just got detected because they drove into the range of that Bayern, and that destroyer is hanging around on the edge of Rolkatsuki's stealth fire detection range. Of course, that Bayern's taking a lot of heavy damage, and a lot of torpedoes are heading his way, and of course he's burning really badly. And I don't think he's gonna, yeah, there he goes. Bismarck finished him off just as Rolkatsuki got around the back of an island and went undetected. Of course, nothing shot at Rolkatsuki because they're so far back on the map. And that's kind of what you saw with stealth fire. The ships would sit back, they never approached cap, they'd just farm any damage they could find, and they'd never really participate in the battle. And you'd never see a good push going because nobody wanted to push into them and just get burnt up because they couldn't fight against them. So like I said, it made a very stagnant gameplay scenario that nobody wanted to deal with, and thankfully Wargaming kind of got rid of. Even though it did take some skill and some builds to actually do stealth fire, I think the meta that is, or getting rid of the stealth fire meta was definitely a good idea. That poor Graf Spee, he's lived on so long and taken so many shots, but now he's subject to the wrath of Rolkatsuki's whole team and Rolkatsuki's armor-piercing shells, doing itty-bitty bits of damage every once in a while. It's basically like a fire that bounces sometimes and sometimes misses. As you can see, these shells arcs aren't amazing, they're not impressive, but they're not as bad as, say, like a gearing, where your shells go over the moon, back down, and come back down to the ship, and possibly do damage. These shells kind of arc up to the top of your screen and come right back down on the ship, and they do have lower arcs at closer range. That poor Graf just ran into the enemy Gneisenau, and that made him stop. I'm not sure if a friendly BB will capitalize on that, but it looks like he's very sick of the stealth firing ship behind him, doing minor amounts of damage to the back of his ship as he tries to run away. Of course, both the Amagi and the Gneisenau are presenting fairly easy targets, and it looks like one of the destroyers lobbed torps over here at Rolkatsuki too. So that's something to keep in mind as to what's actually spotting Rolkatsuki in this scenario. And wow, that Graf Spee actually got a decent hit on Rolkatsuki, taking off a good chunk of their health. But of course, won't matter pretty soon. Graf Spee is extremely low. I don't think they have the repair. And it looks like Rolkatsuki has got fed up with bouncing the armor-piercing shells and has switched to high explosive and has gone undetected, so that means that destroyer fell back. Now it looks like the Graf Spee got taken out by the friendly Nagato, leaving this cap kinda uncontested if that destroyer did move away. And if I was the enemy destroyers, I'd kind of be pushing on those enemy battleships to see what I could do to take over that B point or take over that A point. Right now, Rolkatsuki's team is still down one ship. They are 2 battleships against 3, 2 destroyers against 2 enemy destroyers. So while they are ahead in caps, the points are still pretty close because of the amount of ships that have been sunk. And it looks like the enemy battleships that are left are starting to push into the Bravo cap and try to force their way to take an objective. Of course, that Amagi slowing down up there, not the best idea for him, as it makes a really good target for, say, an Akatsuki that can stealth fire him. Which Rolkatsuki just switched to the armor piercing, which is a great idea for the broadside of an Amagi. That ship is not heavily armored. It really depends on angling with that ship, whether you have armor or not. And he really wasn't angling there, and it's really easy to pen the side of an Amagi due to that armor deficiency that it has. It also has very weak decks, so that makes plunging fire like the Akatsuki can do like this really, really efficient. And of course, with no destroyers over here, it's really easy for Rolkatsuki to pop smoke and go to town on these battleships as they take the cap circle. So, Gneisenau, he's stuck in there. Secondaries are going off. He's definitely trying to make an effort of this, but he's trying to get away from the ship that's stealth firing him, even though it's not really hitting him. And even Rolkatsuki, when they sent me this replay, said, I'm not going to do a lot of damage, but the ending result's kind of nice. And, ooh, there's the enemy Kagero. The enemy Fubuki's all the way across the map with the other battleship, but the Kagero is still pretty close, which is something to take note of if they try to scout. Looks like he's trying to push in with the enemy battleships, though, and take out some health off the friendly Nagato and Tirpitz that are over guarding the Bravo cap. So, ooh, Kagero actually took a big hit in there. Hopefully he'll get taken out by either one of the battleships, or Rolkatsuki will get a decent shot on him. Oh, Tirpitz took him out with secondaries. Great job to that Tirpitz. Amagi still presenting a decent target for plunging fire. Well, I guess that's always a decent target for plunging fire, if you don't hit the back 3 turrets like this. Ooh, enemy destroyers sneaking up on the back of C-Cap. I'm not entirely sure if Rolkatsuki has noticed it yet, but they are detected. Could be by that Gneisenau too. I'm not sure if that destroyer's around the side of that island yet. But enemy Gneisenau broadside takes a couple of shells, but it doesn't do a ton of damage. Enemy Fubuki lobs shells at the tier 8 destroyer. That's 2 tiers higher than him. And that's as soon as the last ship on Rolkatsuki's team other than them gets sunk. So now it's 1 versus 4. And Rolkatsuki's team has 3 caps. So that's a fairly good position to be in. They haven't been pushed out. And Rolkatsuki still has this ship that can actually contest these caps really nicely with the stealth fire range. As you can see with this Fubuki getting absolutely tortured here by a ship that can stealth fire while it's still detected. Not that it did a lot of damage to the Fubuki, but it definitely pestered him while he was still detected, and the ship that was shooting at him that he could see before was not. So it looks like he got fed up and popped smoke. Enemy Gneisenau and probably the Amagi are capturing the Bravo point. Looks like it was just the Gneisenau, the Amagi was off to the side, it looks like. Or it was just the Amagi. I guess I had my ships wrong. Alright then, so the Amagi cap, Gneisenau is pushing around the side. Rolkatsuki drops a set of torpedoes into the path of the Gneisenau, hoping that he'll continue driving into those and take one to hopefully sink. At least, well, hopefully more than 1 torpedo. They are Japanese torpedoes, so they do quite a bit of damage. Enemy Fubuki ahead. Looks like he's trying to push into the cap point while he thinks he has support from the Bravo cap. Rolkatsuki has armor piercing loaded. Bounces a lot of shells off the side. High explosive loaded. Bit of damage there, bit more damage, no modules taken out. Those torpedoes would be great to take out right now, but it looks like the Fubuki will get sunk. 2 torpedoes into the Gneisenau now, so he'll be pretty low. There's some shots probably from the Amagi, but those missed, and looks like the Gneisenau now flooded out. So that's a free kill right there. And now if you look, that's 926 points to 573. The closest ship that can contest this cap, as the A cap is being contested but is not fully capped, is the Amagi. The Amagi is a fast battleship. It can hit upwards of 30 knots if I remember correctly. And it packs quite a punch if it can see you. So in that Amagi's best interest right now, he would be charging straight into the C cap point to A, try to kill Rolkatsuki's Akizuki, or B, try to halt the cap and let their team catch up on points. Right now it is 1 destroyer versus 2 battleships, so it could go either way depending on the skill of the destroyer. If it is a decent destroyer, usually it would win this situation. If one of the battleships is decent and the destroyer gets within their spotting range, the destroyer usually gets vaporized. But as you can see, Rolkatsuki is not really taking any chances. They are getting the hell out of dodge and hoping that the Amagi does not approach the C point. I'd kind of stay around that cap just in case he did, but I guess as long as you have stealth fire range on that cap point and you can stay within detection of the Amagi, that it wouldn't really matter. But of course, time's ticking down. There's 2 minutes 30 seconds left, 980 points, only needs a little bit more time before they hit 1000 and earns the solo warrior for Rolkatsuki. And I'm really surprised that the Amagi hasn't slipped into cap yet, because you would think a fast battleship like that would get right in there, especially against a destroyer that only has 1 torpedo tube. And you can see random shots being fired into sea, but there's no real reason for those to be fired at all. They don't know where Rolkatsuki is, and they don't even know if they're still in the cap. And you did see a battleship get spotted there at the end just on the side of C, so I'm not entirely sure what the Amagi was doing in the first place. Was he trying to sit there and wait for Rolkatsuki to come around the corner? Did he think they were gonna come to him? Not entirely sure, but he gave Rolkatsuki a free solo warrior. So, in my books, that's a decent play on Rolkatsuki's part, a good spot of luck. Going into the first of the end screen shows 95,000 damage done. It's not bad, or actually it's fairly good. It's not one of those big 100k, 170k damage games, but I kind of wanted to put it up, A, because it's a solo warrior, and B, because it really shows why this mechanic was removed from the game, the stealth fire mechanic, because another destroyer like that Fubuki could fire at you. You could just dawdle outside of your stealth fire range and fire at them while they aren't even able to see you. And especially in a destroyer fight, that's pretty painful. And I'm really glad that Wargaming removed it just because of that aspect. Of course, Solo Warrior, devastating strike, 481 hits. I'm curious to see how many of those actually did damage, because as you saw during the replay, the 100mm guns of the Akatsuki don't exactly penetrate very well. Of course, 2 ships sunk and 1 cap taken, leading into a very good solo warrior for Rolkatsuki. Of course, before I get into the damage report, I wanted to show the team list just to show how many of the ships actually participate in this battle, because while you'd think, oh, that Amagi didn't get into the cap circle because he's a potato, he actually finished first on their team. So he did pretty well. And I'm not entirely sure what his thought process was at the end, whether he thought the destroyer would just charge him down to get more damage, or if Rolkatsuki was lurking around. But either way, he must have gotten a little rush of shit to the brain, and kind of lost the game, kind of threw the delay game at least away. Kagero soon after them with, I think, 200 base experience less. Not bad on their performance, and of course a lot of Rolkatsuki's team did participate heavily in towards getting this win. Of course, Rolkatsuki finishing on top with over 2100 base experience. Finally, I wanted to get into the damage screen. Out of 95,000 damage that Rolkatsuki did during the game, only 65,000 of that was with main batteries, 27,000 of that was with torpedoes, and 2,600 was with flooding. Now we don't get very detailed damage reports like say World of Tanks does, where we can tell how many shells actually penetrated. We only get how many shells actually hit. And if you wanted, I guess this would be good for telling the fire rate of the ship and the accuracy, but it doesn't tell you how much the shells really shatter, other than saying, alright, Rolkatsuki hit 481 shells total in the battle and only did 65,000 damage, which that doesn't really tell you much unless you know the alpha damage, how many of those were regular pens, how many were over pens, how many were citadels. It just doesn't tell you anything. But out of the 1,254 armor piercing shells fired, only 455 were actually hit, so I guess you could kind of tell the arc of the ship that this has, and that Rolkatsuki wasn't on the A game for aiming during this game, but still it shows how the stealth fire mechanic was kind of abused while it was still in the game, and why it was kind of removed because it really stagnates the game. Anyways, I hope you guys did enjoy this solo warrior, and good luck out there, and have a nice day.